Rich, I don't know if you heard or not, but we don't even need to play fantasy football this year. At least we don't need to draft any more teams because the winner of every single fantasy football best ball contest has already been determined. It's basically any team that has already drafted Jacory Krosky-Merritt. According to Commanders Camp, those are the teams that are going to be winning all the money this year. Welcome into another episode of Becoming a Best Ball Bro. I'm JJ Zacharyson, joined as always by Rich Ryan. Rich, what's going on, buddy?
JJ, I'm doing great. I can confirm to all the listeners out there and the people watching us on YouTube at Late Round FF that yes, JJ Zacharyson is a real human being. And yes, as everybody says, JJ is way taller than you would expect.
Wait, is it? I thought you were way taller than what were to be expected. I didn't know that I was the taller one. So for those of you who don't know, Rich and I have been doing this show now for well over a year, obviously. And we finally got to meet IRL last week. We had a nice little brunch down in my downtown area in my town and walked around a little bit and hung out. And I thought the same thing about you with the height thing. I thought you, because I think you're taller than me. I'm like 6'1". You've got to be like 6'2"-ish, right?
Yeah, 6'2", right on the dot. Come from a family of just trees in the Ryan lineage. But yeah, it's something about the tiny box that we're looking at. Everything's so compressed that I think naturally we think everybody is shorter than reality.
I mean, look, I can confirm that you have legs. I did confirm that by meeting you IRL. But yeah, man, it was a good time. It was good to hang out for a little bit. And, we didn't really talk best ball throughout that. That brunch.
I don't think we talked like a second of best ball, which is great, actually.
Yeah. I know that I joked about Jacory Krosky-Merritt, but I do got to say, I remember earlier in the offseason, it was like maybe early July. This is definitely humble braggy, but I think it's really funny because my prospect model did not like Jacory Krosky-Merritt. We don't even know what's going to happen here. I mean, we're talking about a 24-year-old rookie who didn't have great production. I think that what we're seeing is an explosive player who, in context and in comparison to what Washington has, definitely looks a lot better because Brian Robinson, I think is more of like a plodding type. Like he's fine. He's fine enough to just handle a big workload. Austin Eckler, obviously older, in age and is more of just a one-dimensional, receiving back. But with Krosky-Merritt, you're getting that explosion. And I think, and the thing is though, he didn't get a combine invite. And so like all of our data and stuff is not as like clean with Krosky-Merritt compared to some of the other prospects. But I say all that because I was not very interested in him as a prospect, just given what we've seen hit in the past. I mean, we're really hoping for like an Alfred Morris type run out with this production profile, ironically with the same franchise. But, we're kind of hoping for that, which to me is fine because I did some research on day 3 running backs that kind of come from nowhere and emerge and they're the ones who are productive in year 1. And so much of it just has to do with the situation and there being really bad, ambiguous backfields ahead of them, which I think we would consider Washington that just based on ADP and the running backs in front of them. So this offseason, throughout the summer, I've actually been throwing like 20th round darts at JCM, like fairly consistently. And I'm having a conversation with David Kitchen the one day, this is like early July, and we're going through our exposure a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, I got like 12% JCM. This might be a terrible idea. And he's like, what? You have what? Like he was just shocked because it was not a player that I had been talking about a lot. Both him and Kyle Monungai. And I think this is where DraftKings having the 2 extra rounds really comes in handy. I don't know if I would have any exposure to these players in an 18 round format, but in 20 rounds, it's a lot easier to just throw that dart in the extra running back. Kyle Monungai is a similar situation where like I've drafted Roshan, but I've drafted a ton of Kyle Monungai just because it's the same situation where you have this ambiguous backfield and like guys that we think that you could hypothetically climb and beat on a depth chart. And so I've gotten Monungai too when my prospect model did not like Monungai at all. I don't think either player, especially Monungai, but I don't think either player really has like true RB2 upside, like legit RB2, like in the season long league that we're just like plugging in and we're confidently playing each week. But in a best ball environment, they can give you some usable weeks, I think.
And it makes logical sense that if anybody was to pop out and have an impressive start to camp, it might be the 24-year-old rookie, right, that has more experience, whose body type is more prepared to play in the NFL. And it also aligns with what we were talking about, or we've talking about all summer, with the quarterbacks going so quickly in the middle to late rounds that we are basically reserving those final rounds to receivers and running backs. And running backs, even more specifically, those are like the ultimate dart throws where somebody's value can absolutely rocket based on the volume presented to them, if things shake their way.
Here's the thing, though. Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt was a 20th round pick and often not even drafted, early on in the Millie environment, in May and June and stuff. I got a lot of exposure that way. But I said this on my live stream that I did today. This is going to be releasing on Wednesday, but I did one on Tuesday. And I talked about how Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt got drafted at 1604 in that draft. And I made comment, like, that's probably one of the earliest times. Like, I would imagine someone listening to this have seen him go even earlier, but that's one of the earliest picks that I've seen him go. But then someone made the comment, and I agree with it, that like 16th round pick versus a 20th round pick is really not that significant of a delta and a difference. And so even though there's this steam building, and this is kind of the theme of today's intro, even though there's this steam building with Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, I don't think it's that big of a deal right now. Like, we're not at a point, and we saw this with Tank Bigsby for a little bit. Tank is finally getting into, like, I've seen him go in like round 11 and stuff where there is a more significant opportunity cost, but there was a good 2-week period where the steam hit, where he's getting first team reps, and his ADP was only like a round and a half higher, if that. And so you were still able to draft Tank Bigsby, based off of that information, because there's this lag with ADP. And so I think the same thing is happening with a Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt and a lot of these other guys that I want to talk through today, who I just seem to be drafting recently. And I want to give you guys kind of an update on it.
Real quick, since we spoke about Tank Bigsby last week, up 21.1 spots in ADP going at the start of the 12th round. But again, that's a ton of steam. It's still, like you said, a 12th round pick. It's still not a ton of opportunity costs that you need to spend to draft that player.
Yeah. And obviously like 12th is going to be different than like 16th and stuff, but
absolutely.
Like I said, there is a window still. Even if you are on top of the news and if you are just being reactive to the news, you are going to have a window to be able to draft a handful of teams, a good amount of teams, and just get right back on track with your exposure if you are underweight on a certain player. I think that's what the key is here, right? So, another example of that, I'll just go through some of these players that I've been drafting more this week. We'll go with some of the later round guys first, because since we're on the topic, but Braylon Allen is one who I've been drafting a little bit more of. I'm not of the belief that Breece Hall is going away or is a bad pick. I think that Hall, obviously Justin Fields has had his struggles evidently in camp, but Hall to me could easily finish number 2 on the team in targets this year. And I'm going to targets at the running back position. I'm going to lean into pass catching backs because that's very sticky. It's very predictive. And those are the players who outperform ADP and expectation best. So I'm going after Breece Hall still. Braylon Allen has been profiles more as like a one-dimensional early down guy. You have this Detroit influence in New York right now where I think they see it as like a Gibbs Montgomery situation more than likely. Like that's the mindset per se. I don't think that the backfield share will necessarily look the exact same as that. Like I think Breece being in a Gibbs role will see more early down work than Gibbs did to start, what he's seen in Detroit with a healthy Montgomery. But Braylon Allen should still be a usable, like give you some spiked weeks, maybe be the 75% out of 100%, goal line guy and seeing the goal line touches and stuff like that. And so, as much as I thought he was overvalued last year by the fantasy community, where, he was good the first couple of weeks, and then people had this like anchoring bias of Braylon Allen being a really, really good running back and being better than Breece Hall and all this stuff. Like every advanced metric says that Breece Hall was better. Most of them say that Breece Hall was better than Braylon Allen last year. I thought Isaiah Davis, one of my favorite sleepers last year in last year's class, was actually really good. But at the end of the day, if the coaching staff is sitting here and saying, we want Braylon Allen to be the 1B or the RB2 in this backfield, like we have to lean into that. And not only that, but Allen was an extremely young prospect coming in. I think he's still only 21, right? He was 20 last year when he entered the league. Just a physical freak. Like he is insane. I mean, he was getting run in college at Wisconsin his freshman season as a 17-year-old, right? Like he's not a normal prospect. And so I liked him enough as a prospect, but I do think that he's a little bit one-dimensional, like I said. But if a player is going to be 21 years old, we can't just assume that he's already kind of flatlined and this is just who he is as a player, right? And so because of that, I'm fine with kind of throwing out. We know that efficiency metrics aren't super, super sticky at running back anyway. So I'm fine with kind of throwing it out last season and just being like, okay, yeah, like I don't think he's like special per se, but I do think that we should be open-minded about him improving as a player, which is why I've been drafting him more. I'm at like 12% Braylon Allen. So it's not even just the last week that I've been drafting him more. You don't get to a 12% exposure by only drafting a player, significantly over a 1 week period, unless you're just drafting a lot in that 1 week. So yeah, I've been going after him a little bit, and his ADP just doesn't seem to be moving that much. What do you have with his average draft position?
Yeah, up 8 spots week over week, but since we started doing this, he's only up 6.6 spots. He did get a little buzz coming out of the green and white scrimmage, where all 3 backs, Isaiah Davis included, were praised by their performance. But I think that's because, JJ, the best unit on this team, I think, is going to be the offensive line. PFF has them ranked 9th heading into the season. And from all the folks that I'm following that are the best ball knowers within the Jets community, the standout in camp this year has been Olu Fashanu. And he just looks like a dude ready to be an every down mauling left tackle in this league. So if Armand Membu can come up to speed on the other bookend, you have a very strong offensive line with a quarterback who's inconsistent and a pretty good defense, which means let's run the ball a ton, which that gives Montgomery corollary to Brees and Braylon makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, 100%. And then another player, 2 other guys that are kind of in this bucket of, yes, they're rising in ADP, but I'm still fine with getting them because, again, a 17th round pick is not that much different than a 20th round pick. Keandre Lambert-Smith is one who we've seen now in the preseason, obviously in that opening game in Canton, do his thing. But the thing is, like, if you go back and look at the prospect guide, my numbers actually kind of liked him. Like, he had above average marks across the board. He was someone, if you read the profile that I wrote about him, he was someone who I said it would be difficult for him to find the field right away because Quentin Johnston and Trey Harris and Ladd McConkey are there for an 11 personnel. But what I wrote was, hypothetically, KLS like fit what they would want to do with an 11 personnel package of Trey Harris, Ladd McConkey, and KLS, because KLS can really stretch the field. Trey Harris can play that X, and then you have Ladd McConkey in the slot. Look, Ladd can play on the outside too. He's a really good player. But I could see what they're thinking with a guy like KLS, and he's a big play waiting to happen. Like, he's really good at stretching the field. I think that's how they're going to want to use him, throughout his rookie season. Is he going to be someone that we're like that into, aside from maybe a waiver wire ad or a sleeper pick in a given week throughout the season and season long? That's probably what he is, right? But that's kind of what we want in a best ball pick, someone who's going to make these splash plays, be part of a good offense. He's another player you can throw a dart at if you get Justin Herbert. He's another out with him, so you don't absolutely need Ladd McConkey for those stacks. So I've been getting KLS, and I'm assuming his ADP's been up, week over week and year to date and stuff. But at the same time, it's not going to be so significant, I would imagine.
Still a 19th round pick. Some weeks he's not been drafted, right? He's at least not been part of the data. So he's only up year to date 7.8 spots. And yeah, you're telling me spike week candidate that we can pair with Justin Herbert or get into that game stack. Yeah. We just saw the guy make some plays. Again, we're getting information, we're getting steam, and it's having a minimal impact in the later rounds. It is an obvious dart to throw in those scenarios.
Yeah. And then the last one that I want to throw out there in the late rounds is Woody Marks, who I was not drafting Woody Marks really at all before the Joe Mixon stuff started. But I'm not really that impressed and aggressive in going after Nick Chubb right now, just based on his age, what he looked like last year. We're really just going by coach speak only. If we were to be targeting Nick Chubb confidently, and the coach speak surrounding Chubb has also not been that great, which is always a red flag this time of year whenever coach speak is negative about a player or just neutral about a player. And so I'm a little bit nervous about Chubb. And we know that Chubb historically has been one-dimensional anyway, and is a full PPR platform, and the offensive line isn't very good in Houston. And so I have my concerns about Chubb. So naturally, I'm pivoting to Woody Marks, who, again, like, you have to think a lot of people weren't drafting Woody Marks in general. So it's not like the early lineups were super exposed to Marks anyway. But if you look at his production profile, he did get that Mike Leach, rest in peace, bump, whenever he played under him in college a little bit, but he still had, when he transferred, he still had a pretty good receiving profile. And so I think he could play that kind of role for Houston, hypothetically. And that's more attractive to me, not only because there's this ambiguity of him being a rookie and maybe he's just better than what folks thought. He also had decent enough draft capital, like better draft capital than some of the Munungai and Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt types. And so there's a little bit of potential there, but I like the idea of getting a pass catching back in this offense when the offensive line is such a mess, because I do think that Houston could be a candidate to be like top 7 in the league in pass rate, at least neutral script pass rate, because their defense is good. And so I don't know what kind of game environments they're necessarily going to be in, but I do think hypothetically, like, you look at what this offense can do, what it can't do, and where they're deficient. I mean, the offensive line is the biggest problem. There's not going to be much of a run game, especially without Mixon. If he is banged up entering the season, they're just going to have to throw the out of the ball. And so that could benefit a player like Woody Marks.
Yeah, and it's good. I'm excited to see what Nick Caley does in this offense. Bobby Slowick, it was pretty painful to watch over the last 2 seasons. So to see whatever touch that he can have coming from that McVay-Shanahan tree on targeting some of the backs. And yeah, like you said, Bobby Marks, he's up 37 spots year to date, which makes you want to gasp for air, still going in the end of the 16th round.
Yeah, like, I'm fine. If he goes much higher than that, I'm not going to be as in. I would say that my exposure to him has been more 18th round. So I do think that, like, we got to be at least a little, like, he's the one player that we talked about that I'd probably be a little bit careful of getting biggest like too excited. Yeah. Because, like, to me, if he jumps like Jerome Ford, for instance, like, I'd rather just get the secure pass catching back that we know is going to play that role, that Judkins is still not signed. Like, we have no idea what's going on there. Like, I'd still probably go more for the Ford type, because to me, Woody Marks is almost like Jerome Ford might be the realized version of Woody Marks. You know what I mean? Like, that's the 70th, 75th percentile outcome for a guy like Marks would be like a Jerome Ford type role. So I would just rather go in that direction. And then 2 other guys I want to shout out that I've been drafting. They're not late round guys, so they don't really fall under this umbrella that we're talking about here. I've been getting a lot of Travis Hunter recently. For some reason in my drafts, he's been falling more than I expected. And this was before Liam Cohen went on Rich Eisen's show. I don't know if you saw this clip or not. And he talked about Travis Hunter playing 80% of the offensive snaps. And so, I mean, if that happens, it's wheels up. If he really were to play that much, he should be more of an early 5th round pick than an early 6th round pick. And that's not insignificant. So I do think right now people should be going after Travis Hunter pretty aggressively. And then the other one is Rashid Shaheed. I kind of maybe I was waiting a little bit with like the injury stuff to make sure that he was good to go, but there's just a lot of really good vibes with Rashid Shaheed out of New Orleans. And those vibes really match up with what he's done efficiency wise. I mean, 2 of his 3 seasons in the NFL, he's been over a yards per route run rate of 2, which is not very easy, to do. Obviously, I mean, that 2 mark is usually the one that we're looking for wide receivers to hit in yards per route run. Kellen Moore is now coaching there. And as an offensive coordinator in the NFL, he's never had an offense that's run fewer than 65 plays a game, which is like 3 or 4 more plays than what we typically see from a team. So I think that not only could New Orleans just like be in some pass heavy scripts in general, but if and when that happens, they're going to also probably pick up the pace a little bit, and that's going to improve the volume across the board. I've been drafting Chris Olave all summer. I'm getting more Shaheed right now. I don't know if he's really moved that much in the short term, but I'd imagine Shaheed moved a little bit this year just based on the injury seeming to them to see the injury pretty optimistically.
Yeah, Shaheed up 10.6 since we started potting, 1.6 week over week. And yeah, what you're saying is when training camp started, it was basically, what is Rashid Shaheed doing coming off of that major injury? And it seems like there were no setbacks. So I think we can be comfortable slotting him in, where he should be based on the quarterback situation. I will say, I feel like we heard it a couple weeks ago on this show, and some of my sharper friends, people are just like really in on New Orleans, and I get it, especially on DraftKings. It is a really good break glass in case of emergency stack to grab late. But I'm starting to get the heebie-jeebies about this Chuck Hayner Rattler.
I have not. I do not have. I know that Mattek mentioned a couple weeks ago that, and no shade to Davis. I mean, he's
Levitan too. Levitan.
Yeah.
Seemed like all over too.
To me, I've said this time and time again. My emergency one has typically been I've leaned towards the Giants more than I have the Saints. I've gotten way more Jackson Dart than Tyler Shuck, and maybe that's dumb because Shuck will have more mobility and such. But I think the stability of the job and like the chance of Dart playing this season seems greater based on draft capital and what that coaching staff needs. Right, like they've got a short leash in New York right now. And so even if they're bad, which we all expect them to be pretty bad to start the year, they need to get some Jackson Dart going, because if Jackson Dart shows something, then hypothetically they could keep their jobs another year, right? So they need to show some sign of life, whereas New Orleans, everything is completely new and fresh. So hypothetically, I'm not saying that I think Shuck probably will get run towards the end of the year, and I have thrown that dart. Don't get me wrong. I've thrown the dart at Dart more frequently.
And on Travis Hunter, this is almost exactly what we were just talking about, getting ahead of it, because that 80% comment is going to go through the cycle this next week. And maybe when we start to see Travis on the field in some of these preseason games, but it's not affected it yet. Only up 0.4 spots week over week. So this might be the opportunity right now, literally right now, to get out ahead of it before there's some real Hunter steam.
Yeah, I think that his perfect spot is like in that, like the tail end of that Jalen Waddle tier, I think. On DK, I'd be taking him over a Zay Flowers right now, when he goes after him pretty frequently. I love RJ Harvey and Travion Henderson, so I can't confidently say, because like if you go with like I've had so many zero RB or hero RB type builds where I've gotten, RJ Harvey and Travion Henderson, so it depends on the build. But yeah, I mean, like if you go wide receiver heavy and you can afford to take a chance and take a risk with Travis Hunter, I would say do it. I think that he's someone that would be who's going to probably rise in ADP a little bit over the next week.
Yeah, 3 players before Hunter right now are Waddle, Travion, and RJ Harvey, as you nailed all 3 of those players. The 3 players right after him are Laporta, DeAndre Swift, and Debo. So I can definitely see him separating himself from the group.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I think that's such a tier break too, in my opinion, in drafts, right? And so like I'm confidently taking Travis Hunter over those other guys from just an upside standpoint and such. All right, let's get to our guest today. So I had Matthew Betz on. He's from the Fantasy Footballers. Great analyst. He does best ball. He does everything really. He does best ball, DFS, sports betting. He does injury analysis because he has a physical therapy background too. So he kind of has everything covered. We talked about how he shifts his thinking in best ball now that we're in August. We talked elite tight end, of course, because that's just an easy go-to topic to talk about. We also talked about Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor in a full PPR format. I think that was an interesting discussion, and so much more. So without further ado, here's my interview with Matthew Betz. This episode is sponsored by DraftKings. There's no better way to lock in your fantasy dominance early than with Best Ball on DraftKings, where you draft once and ride your roster all season long. And right now, DraftKings is giving all customers a can't-miss offer. Draft one, get one. Enter a lineup in the $15 million Best Ball contest for just $20, and you'll score another Best Ball ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million, giving you a second shot to win big. It's easy. Just draft your dream team once, no weekly management required, and let your top scorers automatically start each week. Across the whole season, every breakout star, every clutch play, every touchdown will count towards your quest for a share of $15 million. I'm drafting over there all the time. It's an absolute blast. So download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now to draft your $20 Best Ball lineup to play for a share of $15 million and get a second ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million. That's 2 chances to win big without ever setting your lineup again. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. 1 per customer. Enter the Best Ball $15 million headliner contest by 9/4/25 to get 1 bonus entry. $20 entry fee required. Reward expires in 30 days. See terms at DraftKings.com/NFL-best-ball. Sponsored by DK. Now back to the show. All right, Betz, we're now in August. It's officially August. For contests, like the Millie Maker, the Millie Maker's been going on since May. Should we now be approaching our drafts any differently now that we're kind of in the home stretch? Like, are you looking more for unique combos? Are you focusing on exposure a little bit differently? Like, are you looking at drafts differently now as you were maybe in May and June?
Yeah, I think you kind of have to, right? Because when we were drafting in May and June, the ADP landscape was quite different. Now, there's some players that still go, Jamar Chase has been the 101 for forever, and he will be unless something happens. But there's some players that have been kind of locked into their ADPs the entire time, and there's some that have moved a ton, like Mattek is flying up boards. Now we have injuries that are causing guys to fall, camp holdouts, all those things. So it's kind of a different game when you get to August compared to May with the ADP landscape. So I think you do have to shift a little bit, but I think the most impact it's had on me right now as we get more information is kind of my late round strategy as far as like rounds 18, 19, 20 on DK, where, in May, like we have no idea. Like nobody knows who's making the team, who's the RB2, all those things. And so in the first part of kind of this draft window, May, June, I was always more willing to take like the boring wide receiver 3 or, the tight end 3 that I need for my squad because I know they're making the team and I'm not taking a 0 in May and June, which that's part of the risk of drafting that time of year. But now, we're starting to get clarity on like DJ Giddens seems like he's winning the Indy RB2 job. Taj Brooks seems very, very likely to at least be active on game day with the Zach Moss, cut, stuff like that. So I'm more willing to kind of take thin bets later in drafts than I was, 2 or 3 months ago.
Do you do anything with combos in the early rounds? And I mean, mostly like, let's say that you're at the end of the first round, you have like the 11 spot or something like that. And you're going to get Nico Collins with your first pick. And then that Bucky Irving has been a late second rounder, early third rounder throughout the entire offseason, right? Like he's very rarely gone in the early parts of the second round. Is that something that you're interested in to get those combos? Or do you kind of sit back and you say, there's 18 other rounds that I'm about to draft here. I don't need to find this combination and be unique in the first couple rounds and potentially be suboptimal. Because as we know, obviously, like we're drafting these players where we're drafting them for a reason. And I'll just change things up later in the draft where there's not going to be a duplicate, lineup from one team to the next because there's 20 rounds in the draft. Is that something that you're worried about or do you not worry about it?
So it's funny because in theory, I think we should consider this like a DFS game in some ways, right? There's so much game theory with best ball, which makes it just a different game than your regular redraft league. And so having some unique combinations does seem like something we should want to do. The nice thing is DraftKings usually gives it to us without having to actually do anything because of, it's the wild, wild west, right? Like you don't even know what you're going to get when you sit down in a room and click start draft. Crazy things happen. So there's been so many times where like I'll go into it and I get the 10th, 11th, 12th pick and it's like, okay, maybe I can get a little bit of a unique, like you said, Nico and Bucky or Nico and Jonathan Taylor or something like that, where it's like, this isn't happening super often. But then all of a sudden, 2 round 1 guys will fall to the 12 and 13 spot. And it's like, I'm not going to pass on that. Right. So it's so draft dependent, but there are times where, if I get a slot, like 3 or 4 drafts in a row, I want to make sure that I'm not on autopilot drafting because it's very easy to do that, right? Like everybody's got their guys they like in different pockets of the draft and it's subconsciously or consciously, we just click the button over and over again on the same guys. So there are times where it's like, most of the time in this spot, let's say Brian Thomas Jr. falls to like the 14th spot. Like I want to make that bet. Super strong profile. Obviously it's not hard to envision a massive year 2 from him, but like sometimes I want to just say, what if I'm wrong? and take somebody else. So yeah, I will definitely kind of like check myself on that at times, but because DraftKings ADP is almost not real, you'll get combos that you didn't even think you were going to get, and you don't even have to necessarily force it.
Yeah, I've been noticing that too. I would totally agree, at least from my experience. How do you handle exposure? Like, are you someone who is, because I'm looking at my exposure right now in the Millie, really don't have a ton of guys over the 20% mark. Like it's really not frequent. And, I think anyone who's listened to my content through the years, they're not like overly surprised by that. But are you someone who thinks that you should be in that 30 to 40% range with certain players, or are you relatively flat with the higher volume that you're playing?
Yeah, this is, I think, person to person risk dependent, obviously. Like if you feel so strongly about a certain player or a certain pocket of the draft and where players go and you want to make that bet, I don't think that you should necessarily be afraid to make that bet, because again, this is kind of like a DFS slate. Like this is one season of best ball, and you're making bets and they should be calculated bets. And if you really believe in that, I think you should push it if you think you have an edge. The tricky part is being able to predict the NFL season is impossible. And so you are embracing so much risk, and it can pay off in a massive way or crush your entire season, depending on which way the year goes. If you make those 30% and 40%, portfolio exposure bets. I have done that in the past and gotten completely burned. Mm-hmm. The problem is, at the same time, you can be right about certain things and it doesn't matter in best ball. And that's the frustrating and kind of hard part if you're new to this. Like last year, remember there was the whole Rashee Rice saga of, is he going to get suspended or not? And he fell at times to the 70s and the 80s. And it's like, I went into the season, I was like, I'm making this bet every time because it seems very clear that he is headed towards a 4th round price or a 3rd round price. And for the first 3 weeks, like that looked awesome. And then he got hurt and it didn't matter, right? So I have definitely cooled on being somebody that goes to the 30% or 40% mark on certain guys for those reasons. I don't know if that's recency bias or what, but I think if that happens, you have bad variance luck or injury luck or whatever, you kind of kick yourself in hindsight. So I definitely have capped my exposure. I don't think right now, I looked just before we started recording, I didn't have anybody above 25%. So I'm kind of with you in that aspect.
Do you feel more comfortable? What I would assume with sort of later round guys being in that, like I would imagine your 25% player is not, Nico or Brian Thomas. Not only is it just difficult for that to be the case, but also you don't necessarily want to invest that heavily, or do you, in an early round pick?
No, I'm with you. I mean, this year especially, the first, I would say 15, 16 picks. I mean, sometimes AJ Brown goes 20th overall. Like the top 20 picks are all awesome. Yeah. So I'm definitely not making huge stands in that part of the draft. It's more later on. Actually, my highest roster guy, and people that know my content are going to laugh at this because it's been the last 3 years in a row. It's Jaylen Warren this year again.
I got Warren too.
But where he goes, it's a strong bet that I feel like, I want to make. But yes, it's easier to make those stands, obviously. And I think it's probably better to make those stands later on in the draft if you think you have an edge there. But yeah, I'm not, this year especially, I'm not making hard stands anywhere in the first 15, 20 picks.
Yeah, it's hard. Like you said, there's so many good players. The crazy thing is, I think every fantasy analyst has gone through this process and dilemma of looking at AJ Brown and saying, man, I love AJ Brown this year because, they're going to throw more. Obviously, it's AJ Brown, so he's an incredibly efficient wide receiver. If he maintains the target share, he'd be a monster. And then you go to rank him and you're like, oh, I kind of understand why he's going in the pocket that he's going in, because there's just so many good players going in that area. I'm a little bit higher on Brown, but it's hard to be so massively overweight on these guys just because the alternatives are still so good.
For sure. And I think that kind of speaks to the strength of the market in general, just getting better year over year over year. It was easy even just a couple of years ago to be like, why are we taking this guy in the 2nd round? I can't think of a good example off the top of my head, but pretty easy to find fades early on. Now, I mean, even on DraftKings where it's the Wild Wild West, I think it's decently efficient in the first, 23, 24 picks, something like that. So yeah, I mean, I love AJ Brown, but I also love Drake London and I love Brock Bowers and all these guys. So
right.
Yeah, I'm not making hard stands this year early on.
Speaking of Brock Bowers, last week on the show, Davis Mattek, who is not shy to be bold, but Davis Mattek came on the show and he said that Brock Bowers is the best pick on DraftKings. He kind of said it. I feel like the take was sort of evolving as he spoke, right? Like he was kind of creating it as he was going through, talking through it. But do you think that he's crazy in saying that? And then I want to ask you if you are drafting those elite tight ends pretty heavily on DraftKings, and why or why not?
Yeah, I listened to that, and it was like you said. It kind of seemed like you started it, and then I can't stop now.
The most Davis thing ever. Yeah,
we're going with this, which I respect.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brock Bowers is an awesome pick this year because you look at. I think historically we've done a pretty good job in general with like the best one or two tight ends as far as pricing, because it's been Kelsey, and it's kind of easy to price Kelsey, generally speaking, over the last 8 years, but. In general, I think we're terrible as a fantasy community as far as like where should the tight end 4 to 10 go.
Yeah.
And last year was a great example of that, right? We had like Dalton Kincaid and Kyle Pitts for the 6th year in a row, go as the top 60 pick or whatever it was. I just think right now we still have like a little bit of hesitancy with Brock Bowers, because if we thought this was prime Kelsey, if we thought this was going to be the next Kelsey for the next decade, he should probably be a first-round pick. Like that's kind of where Kelsey was going, historically. So I think he's a good target. I think he's an awesome pick in the second round, especially considering the peripherals of what he showed last year. Over 2 yards per route run, 153 targets, just dominating. But also the thing with him and McBride I keep going back to is like, if you could poke holes in the regression signals for these guys, it'd be like, maybe I want to fade this. But both guys are set up for more touchdown luck this year. So you get the volume, but also like, what if those touchdowns hit, right? I mean, the McBride thing, everybody's talked about all summer with the regression, probably nobody more obvious to catch more touchdowns this year. But Brock Bowers, I mean, he had 6 total targets inside the 10-yard line last year, 1 red zone touchdown. So if Geno is just league average, which I think he's better than league average, and they're in the red zone more often. I mean, I just think Brock Bowers could go absolutely nuclear this year. So yeah, I'm taking a bunch of Brock Bowers, but as I just mentioned a little bit ago, it's so hard to make these hard stands with these guys because I want to draft Bucky and AJ Brown and Lab McConkey and all those guys. So, but yes, I am definitely trying to get overweight these 2 elite tight ends.
I've had an easier time with the elite tight ends on DraftKings number 1, because you get this full PPR, environment, you get bonuses, and like realistically, a guy like McBride or Bowers, you think about the playoffs, and this is more anecdotal and but like think about those 3 weeks that you're really needing those ceilings, and like the advantage and the edge that you can get from those guys is insane, is absurd. And I'm like the first person to say that a lot of times in fantasy football, people will overrate the edge that tight ends are giving them because of the cost that we're incurring to get those tight ends, right? Where yes, we're getting these tight ends in the second round or what have you, and they're very, very good versus all the other tight ends. But all the other tight ends, or a lot of them, aside from the ones that you talked about in like the middle rounds that are usually kind of mispriced and people don't know what to do with them. But like you're getting legitimate starting tight ends in round 14, 15, 16 in your home league, especially, right? But the difference, I think, with best ball that I've at least kind of, as I've become a best ball bro, not quite there yet. But as I've gone on this journey and I've thought about this more and more, I do think that of all positions, tight end is the one where having the waiver wire can just be so beneficial, right? Like even McBride, the year that he started to break out, like he was on waiver wires because people did not want to deal, like they weren't thinking about him nearly as much. And so I do think that having that safety net and that backbone is a lot easier to handle a late round tight end approach in a season long league. Whereas when you're in this contained environment in best ball, it's just a lot easier to just go after one of those tight ends. I want to see if you agree with that, but then also when you get one of those tight ends, are you building a 3 tight end room still, or are you going with more of a 2 tight end room?
Yeah. So to that point, I was earlier on, even when I'm taking one of these elite guys, because of the May, June aspect of like, I don't know what's happening around 18, 19, 20. Let me just get somebody that's definitely making the team. Sometimes that would be a tight end 3, even though I already had Bowers or McBride. I don't want all of my teams to look the same. So right now, a lot of people are drafting 3, 6, 8, 3. 3 quarterbacks, 6 running backs, 8 wide receivers, 3 tight ends. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Like I have a lot of that as well, but I don't want all of my teams to be that. So right now, as some of these kind of dart throws in the later rounds become more viable, I guess is a good way to put it. I've, I guess, cooled a little bit on the 3 tight end situation with these elite tight ends. At the same time, because of how crazy DraftKings can be, sometimes I'll plan to just go with a 2 tight end build, and all of a sudden, Bretton Strange falls 30 picks past ADP and you've got Trevor Lawrence. It's like, how bad could this be, right? So it's always room dependent, but I'm not going into every draft saying no matter what, 3 tight ends.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about 2 running backs in round 2 that it seems like analysts, and there's been analysts on this show that have said that they're not really being aggressive with them, especially in a full PPR platform, but it's Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor. Do you think it's silly to fade them? Are you fading them, or are you aggressively going after them this year?
I cannot tell you how much money I have wasted fading Derrick Henry over the years.
Same.
Oh man. So on the DFS and betting show that Kyle and I do, we have this kind of like running bit, but it's also not that much of a bit, where it's like in DFS, if Derrick Henry is popular, you just play him in cash, like play him in cash. Don't get buried by the avalanche. In tournaments, fade him and hope for the best.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I don't know. Every year I've faded Derrick Henry at cost, and he just comes back and does it again. And on a full PPR site, it is tough, right? Because obviously we know the pass catching is highly unlikely to be there. We've got years of data on that. He was the RB4 last year in points per game. It took 325 carries and 18 total touchdowns to do that.
Yeah.
He's coming off the board at RB6. So he's the guy that goes kind of in the, pick 13-ish range. He's the guy I'm definitely underweight on.
Yeah.
But if he falls to like the 16th or 17th pick or something like that, I'm happy to kind of get a little bit of exposure there, but I definitely don't want to just chase what happened last year and assume it will happen again this year. So that's my like caveat, cowardly take of saying I'll take him when he falls, but I'm not taking him at ADP.
Okay.
Jonathan Taylor is more of a tough sell for me because like the Ravens are one of the best teams in football.
Right.
The Colts, there's so many ways this could go. I could see Jonathan Taylor having an outlier rushing season because we've seen it before, but you think about the added pieces and kind of added elements this year. You've got the whole like Richardson situation at quarterback, stealing goal line work. Tyler Warren could mix in for some of that. He did that at Penn State. He could have some goal line touches. You could have a situation where this team is just flat out bad, and all of a sudden we're asking about Shane Steichen's job in week 8.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how likely it is, but like kind of has to happen this year. So I think there's way more fragility in the Jonathan Taylor price tag relative to Derrick Henry, because we are talking about one of the teams in Baltimore that still has one of the highest average team totals in the league and the highest win totals. And Jonathan Taylor goes, 4 picks later or 5 picks later, whatever it is. So I'm not like Xing out Taylor, but he's one guy that I will certainly be well underweight the field.
Yeah, I'm with you. With Derrick Henry, it's so scary to not draft him. Like I'm trying to be in like the 6% range with Derrick Henry this year. Yeah. And part of it too is Baltimore, the way that they scored touchdowns last year did come through the air more frequently than what was expected, right? And so if that regresses a little bit and they run for more touchdowns, we'll say, yeah, maybe Lamar Jackson gets some of those, but like Derrick Henry could have like an absurd touchdown related season, right? And like that's the scary part. But I'm with you, like with Jonathan Taylor, like straight up, are you Chase Brown over Jonathan Taylor right now?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
I am. I'm Chase Brown over Jonathan Taylor for the fact that I think that at the very least you can use a tiebreaker of Anthony Richardson, and the fact that Richardson's getting hyped up, and we've seen him with Jonathan. Like Taylor last year had like a sub 5% target share with Anthony Richardson. And that's frightening, and on a full PPR platform like that. We know, I try not to like fade players who I know can have nuclear weeks. Like we know that Jonathan Taylor can do that, but we're obviously trying to make just general bets based off of, what is likely to happen in playing probability and stuff. I'm with you though with Taylor. It's a harder click to make. The one thing I will say with him, it seems like he does go in that pocket where it's after like the opportunity cost isn't as strong, right? Because it's after like those elite wide receivers and stuff. So it's a little bit easier to get him because of that. And I'm still getting some, but I actually think the Anthony Richardson thing could like be a huge detriment at the end of the day, just based off of what we saw last season. So are there any like top 3 round running backs other than those two that you're kind of on more of the fade side than the target side?
Yeah, there's two that are the biggest fades for me right now. One is Kyron, which I don't think is a unpopular opinion from other analysts. Like, we've all kind of done this with Kyron, for a couple of years, where it's like, how good is he actually? Does it even matter because Sean McVay loves him?
Yeah.
But at the same time, 32nd overall for a running back who's really not going to be involved much in the passing game. And also, if you think Cooper Kupp is done and Devonta Adams still has it, that's one more guy in the offense that's going to see the football. Now Matthew Stafford injury concerns are by the day getting more and more real, I should say. So Kyron is a guy I really haven't taken much at ADP. There are random drafts where he'll fall into the 40s and it's like, okay, maybe I'll take a share here or there, but I haven't taken much Kyron. The other guy is James Cook, who I think is probably going to be falling here a decent amount if this holding, I guess, continues. But, we talked about regression in a positive way for McBride and Bowers. What James Cook did last year was just unreal.
Yeah.
So if you bet against that and you say, okay, maybe he scores 8 or 9 touchdowns and not 16 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like, clearly there's room for this to come down. And then the other issue with James Cook that I have is just that I've done some studies and kind of looking at like players that do hold out and how does it affect them? And it depends on when they report. Like, remember we had that Saquon year with like the Giants. He came back like a week into camp.
Yep.
Last year you had CeeDee Lamb hold out until basically the week before the season. And, he got off to a slow start. He's talked about that. So I just think you have regression going to hit James Cook in the face. Also the holdout. Also the cost is more than it was last year. So at that price, at that ADP, I'm willing to bet against that. So James Cook is another guy I have almost none of on DraftKings, which is kind of scary because I love the archetype of how he plays and how he scores fantasy points. But when he used to be, a 6th round pick and the year before that, like an 8th round pick, it's just a different, bet than what we're making here at like 40th overall.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. And the Kyron stuff, I think the easiest way to describe Kyron is that his workload is just so fragile, right? Like, if he sees even like a 10% drop in running back rush share, that dramatically changes his outlook. It's just that he's been at its peak, at his workload peak, and maybe he maintains that, but I think that it's smart just from a probability standpoint and just in general in the way that like the ebbs and flows of football to sort of bet against, Kyron Williams continuing to see the workload that he saw last year. Now, one question, speaking of fading players, one question that I've asked on perspectives and on becoming a best ball bro, and it's more out of my own curiosity because I think it's a really interesting part in the draft where you have this like group of wide receiver, let's just say wide receiver 20 to wide receiver 40, right? Like maybe like late 4th round, like into the late 4th round on DK through round 7 or round, into round 8. There's a lot of wide receivers that people are drafting and choosing from, but are there any wide receivers in that range? Because like you said, it seems like the market's pretty efficient overall. Are there any wideouts that you're just like not getting behind at all and you don't understand their ADP in that range?
Yeah, one guy that's particularly tough right now for me is DK Metcalf. He's currently coming off the board at wide receiver 22, which in a full PPR setting in an Arthur Smith offense is just kind of one of those, like, I think he'll have some big games, don't get me wrong, but I don't see a world where he's getting to this kind of like routinely 8 catches, 9 catches type of situation. And you go back and kind of look at and I know it was different situations and different personnel and all those things, but like looking at what George Pickens did last year, looking at what Drake London did in that frustrating year with Atlanta and Arthur Smith, like those guys are averaging like 7.5 targets per game. In the Ultimate Draft Kit, we have 7.8 targets per game right now for DK Metcalf. Let's assume that that's right. 8 targets a game, 9 targets a game, and he's catching 4 or 5 balls a week. Like on a full PPR site, the efficiency is going to have to be there for that to be the thing that buries you. And don't get me wrong, like I said, he'll have some big weeks, but how good is Aaron Rodgers anymore? I don't know. Yeah. Like, I mean, he supported some huge games from Devonta Adams last year and Garrett Wilson at times, but like just thinking about this Pittsburgh team, like, doesn't it feel like they are so excited to win every game? 17-14 every week. Like that is the Steeler way. And yes, the target share will be there, but that's the tricky part, right? Like, what is 30% of a target share in an offense? It's going to be probably bottom 5 if we're conservative, bottom 10 in pass attempts per game. So I lean other players at that spot with Metcalf, where I think the upside is exciting, but at the same time, the target volume in full PPR is just so important.
Yeah, that's a good call out. Interesting call out for sure. Are there any stacks that you've been going after pretty frequently over on DraftKings?
Yeah, so this one, it's tough recently with some of the news, but the Niners are one that I was pretty big on early in the process, where all these guys were so cheap. And, like you've done a lot of the research on the ambiguous situations.
Yep.
There's nothing ambiguous about the running back room, but who knows at wide receiver?
Yeah.
And so I was taking shots on Pearsall and Jennings, but now Jennings has the calf issue, and Pearsall missed a little bit of time. He's back. But I still want to buy into the Niners for sure because of the strength of schedule and obviously Purdy being efficient, and the defense could really struggle. So I'm still in on San Francisco, but I'm closely monitoring injury situations with that room and that team. I like the Vikings quite a bit. Those are guys that are, generally speaking, outside of Jefferson, pretty cheap. You get the Dome, one of the best offensive lines in the league. I'm a JJ McCarthy believer. And honestly, I would follow Kevin O'Connell into a burning building at this point with what he's done with quarterbacks.
Yeah, great for fantasy. We love him for
in
fantasy.
His time. So, and you've got the ambiguous running back room, kind of, right? With Jones and Mason. And I'm just kind of mixing and matching different types of Viking stacks across my 150 set and hoping for the best. And then the other one that I'm really into is the Packers passing game.
Yeah.
Again, ambiguous. Like, some people think it's Jaden Reed. Some people love Matthew Golden. I don't really know. Nobody wants to draft Romeo Doubs.
Yeah.
And then you kind of have Tucker Kraft in this, he's tough, right? Because I think generally speaking, he's probably a little overpriced. But at the same time, what if he is just that good? And what we saw last year is kind of who he is as a player. And he emerges as like a legit top 1 or 2 option in this passing room. So yeah, I mean, what a Josh Jacobs. He had like a rushing touchdown in 8 weeks to close the season in a row or something like that.
Yeah.
So if you just think things bounce back towards Jordan Love a little bit, I think he could bring a lot of his teammates along for the ride. And all of those guys, except for Josh Jacobs, are super cheap.
I love the Packers call out. I love all 3 teams you just called out, but the Packers one has just been bizarre to me in a way where, like, a lot of times Jordan Love just ends up being sort of the falling pocket passer in these drafts, which is weird too, because you have multiple like outs for him to get drafted and stacked with Jaden Reed and Matthew Golden. And it seems like those managers just like aren't eager to get Love all the time. And then, like you said, Romeo Doubs is always just really, really cheap on DK. He's one of my highest drafted players. Tucker Kraft is, like you said, like crazy regression coming on like the yak per catch perspective, like from that perspective, but also only had like a 15% target share last year. The Packers are bound to throw a ton more this year than they did last year. If you look at, Matt LaFleur's history with them and how much and really what we see from pass rates that are in that like 48% range where they were at last year and how they look the following season. Things are looking good, I think, for the Packers passing attack. So I'm with you. I think sprinkling in both Reed and Golden is like, seems like everyone, like, you need to take a stance on like one of those guys. I think like I probably lean more Golden from the perspective of like what that looks like in home leagues and stuff, because people are more risk averse with rookies, even though they shouldn't be. And so I'll say Golden's the better value or what have you, but do you have like a lean between those two that you're more aggressively going after, or is it more of like a 50-50 thing for you?
Yeah, honestly, it's more 50-50. I deep down, I feel like Matthew Golden is not going to work.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
we don't know. Nobody knows, right? Like, the NFL gets stuff wrong all the time. We get stuff wrong all the time. I'm not a pro NFL evaluator and all these things, but like analytically speaking, Matthew Golden has one of the worst round 1 profiles we've seen in a very long time.
It's rough. Yeah, it's not great.
So I wouldn't be surprised if he fails. At the same time, I don't want to fade a first round wide receiver who the NFL was so high on. Like, everybody's like, just turn on the tape, man.
Yeah.
Turn on the tape.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm here. We're looking at the spreadsheets. We're like, if the tape is so good, where are the numbers?
Yeah.
But I don't know. So what if he's awesome? So I don't want to fade that, especially when he's not, going in the 5th round or something where it's very, very affordable, like pick 90 or something.
Right. And
then Jaden Reed, the 2 wide receiver set thing is super frustrating. And of course they had their family night scrimmage on Friday night, and he ran 0 routes in 2 wide receiver sets. Somebody made a point to track that and tweet out that Mecole Hardman had more snaps in 2 wide receiver sets than Jaden Reed. I'm not tilted about that at all, but I really thought going into the offseason, I was like, what if this is the year that they actually put him in 2 wide receiver sets, because you have the uncertainty of the future of Romeo Doubs, not under contract next year. at what point do the Packers say enough with the Dontavian Wicks stuff, right? Like, we all think he's good, but like, you got to catch the ball, man.
Yeah.
At some point, coaches get frustrated with that. Christian Watson, late season ACL tear. So it kind of seemed to me like maybe the seas were parting for Reed to have that early on in camp. Seems like not the case. But if we think they're forced into more dropbacks, then he'll be on the field in the slot in those 3 wide receiver sets. And he's going to give us a ton of, I think, spike week potential. And if you remember last year, the hype after his rookie year was out of control, where he was going in like, the 5th, early 6th round. And now maybe the pendulum has swung back too far. So I don't know where the truth is on Reed. I just know he's talented and capable of big plays. And I'm betting on the Packers. So I'm just throwing my hands up and saying, I'll take both these guys when they're on the board.
Yeah, Reed also feels like more of the best ball pick, if I'm being honest, where it's like, like with Golden, you can at least tell a story from a season-long managed league perspective of like, hey, if he hits, he's going to really, really hit. Whereas with Jaden Reed, let's just say that like there's a 90% chance that he's just going to stay in the same kind of role. Well, even in that role, like he's still going to have spiked. Like he's an unbelievably efficient player and really good with the ball in his hands. So it's like he could still give you something in that environment, but it might not be as predictable. And so therefore it's just easier to click that name as sort of a safer bet with those spiked weeks in a best ball environment. Are there any offenses that you're avoiding generally in best ball right now?
So what I'm about to say is I'm going to lose all credibility, and this is going to be great. But this is my caveat, where it's like best ball, especially in these large field lotto style contests. This is a game that we're playing, right? And so you have to think about some of the game theory elements. And this past offseason, Kyle and I did a bunch of research, just kind of looking at like what players need to do at certain ADPs in best ball from a team level perspective. And what we found is basically like when NFL offenses have 3, 4, 5 pieces going in the first like 60 to 70 picks, it's really tough for those guys to all pay off ADP. Yeah. And right now, the Lions, except for Jared Goff, are all insanely expensive. And don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm drafting Lions, but I'm not taking like 3 of these guys or 4 of these guys in the same team, because what they have to do is they have to be the best offense in football again. But at the same time, we know that they're probably not going to be with just the natural regression coming for this team. Mm-hmm. They played a ton of their games indoors last year. They play more outdoor this year. Of course, Ben Johnson is gone. Jared Goff's touchdown rate is due to come down. All of the things, right? The defense was injured from spot 1 to 11 across the board. Yeah. If anybody's watched like the Netflix documentary and stuff, like there's a Dan Campbell pre-Thursday Night Football game against the Packers where he's like, listen, we have to win this game on offense. Yeah. We're going for it on 4th down every time. Every time. And it was awesome for fantasy. Yeah. But if the defense is just healthier or just, better than they were last year, it's going to be so tough, I think, for all these guys to pay it off. That said, I'm drafting all of them just across different teams. I'm not taking them all together as a stack, if that makes sense. So Lions are tough. And the same thing's true with the Bengals, which is scary to say. But right now, I mean, Chase Brown's, I don't know if he is already, but he's going to be a 2nd round pick sooner than later. Obviously, Chase goes 1st overall. T is at the 2-3 turn, and Burrow is somewhere around pick 50-ish, depending on your room. Like, man, they have to be as good as they were last year, and the defense has to be terrible again, and they might be. But last year, if you guys recall, we had the Jamar Chase holdout situation. So there were times where we could get Jamar Chase like 8th overall, 7th overall. And T. Higgins, he was still kind of in the same zone, but nobody knew who the running back was. So we had Zach Moss and Chase Brown going way, way later. And because of the like down year from the year before, the calf issue that Burrow had, Burrow was pushed down to like the 70s, 80s in ADP. So if we just think that we're going to like copy and paste last year, the prices last year were so different. So same thing as the Lions. Like I obviously see the path where this team is incredible. Sure. Yeah. But the ADPs for these teams, there's no room for error. They have to be perfect basically for this to pay off. So I have an underweight Bengal stacks and Lion stacks, which is just not something I really want to say publicly, but there it is.
No, I think the logic is definitely there. And I've had a really hard time with the Lions in particular, where like not only do they not always align super, super well, just like in the draft for you to stack them, right? Like if you get like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams is usually on the other side of the board, closer to that 4-5 turn. And then, Sam Laporta is usually more of like the early 6 and around there. And so it's not as easy to like stack them in that way. But I think that what you're basically saying is that if you were to just get these guys on a team where they're being drafted right now, chances are there's going to be one or two of them not living up to the hype pretty easily, right? Like, and I think that making those individual bets makes a lot of sense where you're saying, okay, if I get Laporta here, then that means that JMO is the one who's the odd man out, right? Or if I'm not getting Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I get Laporta and Jameson Williams, then maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown's the one who is the odd man out. So it makes total sense, I think, to go with that angle and that perspective, because cost at the end of the day is everything. That's what matters most. Before I let you go, any late round dart throws that you think people should be looking at and they should be throwing themselves?
Man, these players, it's so funny. Every year you get to this part, you're like, I feel good about these picks. And then obviously we know a lot of these guys aren't going to work.
Yeah.
But at running back, I've taken a decent amount of Taj Brooks, TJ Giddens, I mentioned already. I've mixed in some Trevor Etienne recently, more than I thought I would. Jarquez Hunter, I know, is a guy that you've kind of highlighted in your prospect profile stuff. Looking at him, like, if we think Kyron's workload is shaky, maybe Hunter makes sense. I had more Sean Tucker than I care to admit. That's Kyle's fault. And then at wide receiver, like, I've kind of mixed in some Parker Washington on Jaguars teams. I like Jordan Whittington a little bit.
Okay. In
round 20. My theory, and this obviously looks worse as Stafford is more injured, but like, if Stafford is healthy is the caveat. Like, I feel like if Devontae or Puka happened to miss time, I think Tutu's role would probably stay the same in like the downfield wide receiver 3 type setting. And I think Whittington has the ability to kind of be like the backup to those guys, is kind of how I'm playing it. So if I think there's one guy that could be like a huge hit late, to me, it's him. He's actually pretty decent in some of the per route numbers last year.
It was. And
then one guy that I don't understand why I'm taking, but I am, is Noah Brown.
Okay.
With Washington, where, there's playing time potential for him. And we saw Jaden Daniels give some usable weeks to guys like Olamide Zaccheaus and, these kind of guys where, like, he's not the sexiest click in the world. So maybe it's what you need. Like, if you're shooting for the moon with your 20th round pick, then that's not your pick. But if you need just kind of like a safe, this guy's making the team, he'll run routes, all those sort of things. I've been taking Noah Brown. It's probably because I'm taking a ton of Cowboys and for like that, week 17 component. But yeah, those are the guys I've been clicking the most in round 18, 19, 20. There's absolutely no way those guys don't hit.
Yeah. No, I like those names a lot. The Jordan Whittington one, I actually brought him up on a live stream maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I had him in the queue, and people were like yelling at me. I'm like, no, I totally agree with like the idea that if one of those guys goes down, Whittington can play slot pretty well. And he's a converted running back, has good yak ability, had a really good yards per route run rate last year. I think Tutu is the guy that you would prefer over him, but he often goes earlier, and it's also a way to differentiate, right? Because Whittington goes undrafted. Like, how many drafts do you think Whittington gets drafted in? Is it sub 5% at this point?
Oh man. So DK released their data back in June. I don't know if there's been an update since then, but I can't imagine it's more than like 30%.
Yeah, I would say it might even be. I don't really see him going like at all whenever I'm drafting. So be interesting to see how often he's actually getting drafted. I mean, even my go-to in the late rounds has been like Devon Vele, because I apparently like 27-year-old year 2 wide receivers. But it's just one of those things where there's a lot of players like that have, and Noah Brown you could even throw in the same kind of bucket of like, it's the same kind of logic where players who could have just natural roles on their team and get you some production have obviously some contingent upside, but they're not getting drafted in nearly every draft. That's a huge edge, from just a rostership perspective. So I like those call outs a lot. This was great, man. I think people are going to really dig it. Let everyone know what you're working on, where they can find you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Everything that I do is with the Fantasy Footballers. So I host the Dynasty podcast and then as well the DFS and betting podcast. Right now, basically it is injury updates every single day in the Ultimate Draft Kit. So you can head in there, check that out. It seems like everybody has a groin injury this year. So I don't know what's going on, but tons of injuries, and there's unfortunately going to be more. So all that in the Ultimate Draft Kit with the Fantasy Footballers.
Awesome. You can get all of my work over on lateround.com. Make sure you're checking out the draft guide. Make sure you're subscribed to the show. Make sure you're checking out the Patreon. We actually announced a new little perk for the Patreon, so go check that out over on lateround.com. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for tuning in.